Hey guys, instead of starting a new unit because we are done with radicals, I'm actually just going to go over some of the basics again, which is just solving equations. This is something that we've done in algebra, the beginning of Algebra 2, but it's something you're going to need for your ACT, TSI, and definitely your math classes next year as seniors. So this is a skill I just want to reinforce to make sure you are good on. And we're just going to keep going over some of these basic skills these last few weeks. So let's start with this first example. Solve for S. I want to get S by itself. And in order to do that, since it's in the numerator, I need to get rid of this denominator. So we always do the inverse operation. And the inverse of dividing by -1 would be to multiply by -1. So we're going to multiply each side by -1. Let me go ahead and rewrite this whole equation out over here. So I'm going to multiply each side by -1. So what happens on the left side is I really get like -1 divided by -1, which is just 1. So I'm left with S plus 1 equals, and then on the right side, 3 times -1 would be -3. So then I just need to get S by itself, and I'm adding 1 to it. So the opposite of adding 1 would be to subtract 1, because I know 1 minus 1 is 0, which would get S by itself, and it would equal -3 minus 1, which is -4. So my solution would be -4. Okay, what's cool about these is you can always plug it in and check your work, which I know you just love to do. But before you hit submit and don't want to miss that IXL question, go ahead and check yourself. So plug in -4 in for S and check, does it equal 3? So -4 plus 1 is -3, and then -3 divided by -1 would be +3. So I know I did it correctly. Alright, moving on to the next example. Alright, so for this one we need to distribute out the 3 first. So I'm going to multiply each term in the parentheses by 3. 3 times d is 3d, and 3 times -5 is -15. Be very careful with your signs. Make sure that you pay attention to them, especially when multiplying or dividing. So I would get 3d minus 15 equals 9. And then I'm solving for d. So d is over here in this term being multiplied by 3. And I need to get that by itself. So I'm subtracting 15 from 3d. And I know the opposite of subtracting would be to add. So I need to add 15 to each side, because -15 plus 15 is 0. And that would leave me with 3d equals 24. Then I need to get d by itself. So I want to get rid of the 3 and move it to the other side. So the opposite of multiplying by 3 would be to divide by 3. Because 3 divided by 3 is 1, it leaves d alone as 1d. And 24 divided by 3 is 8. So I would get d equals 8. Alright, don't forget to check your answer. Since d equals 8, go back in, take the extra time, plug 8 in for d, and make sure you get it to equal 9. So order of operations, I would do 8 minus 5 first in the parentheses. 8 minus 5 is 3. And it just so happens that 3 times 3 does equal 9. So woohoo, we did it correctly. Alright, moving on to another example. Okay, this is another one where I have a number in my denominator. And this time I'm solving for c. So before I can add or subtract anything, I need to get rid of this denominator. I am dividing all of this by 3. So I know the inverse of dividing by 3 would be to multiply by 3. So I'm going to multiply each side by 3. So when I do that, it leaves me with c plus 17 equals 2 times 3, which is 6. Then if I want to get c by itself, since I'm adding 17 to it, I need to move that 17 to the other side. So the opposite of that would be to subtract 17. 17 minus 17 is 0, so I'm just left with 1c equals negative 11. Okay, plug your answer back in to check before you submit. If c is negative 11, I can plug that in place of c. And I want to check, does negative 11 plus 17 divided by 3 equal 2? Well, negative 11 plus 17 is 6, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. So we did it correctly. I know that c has to be negative 11. Okay, next problem. Solve for c again, and before we can do anything, we need to simplify or combine some like terms. On the left side, I have 18c minus 8c minus 2, and since I have two c terms, I can combine those together. So 18c minus 8c would give me 10c. So I'm just combining these together. So I have 10c minus 2 equals 18. So already we made this a little bit easier just by combining those like terms. Now I need to get c by itself. So my first step would be to add 2 to each side, because I'm wanting to get the term with the c by itself. Negative 2 plus 2 is 0. So I would be left with 10c equals 20. And then I need to divide each side by 10 to figure out what 1c equals, because 10 divided by 10 is 1. So I would know that 1c is equal to 20 divided by 10, which would be 2. Your passcode is chips and salsa, because I've been craving that so much lately, and that's probably the first thing I'm going to do whenever these restaurants open back up, is go eat me some chips and salsa. Anyways, moving on to checking our solution. Plug in 2 for c. So everywhere you see a c, I'm going to plug it in. Excuse the diagonal crooked handwriting. So let's check. If I plug in 2 for c, does it equal 18? So 18 times 2 is 36, minus 8 times 2 is 16, and 36 minus 16 does indeed equal 18, so we know we did it correctly. Okay, this one's even more fun. I got a lot more going on. So let's simplify this left side before we start solving for r. So I can tell right here that I've got lots of r's that I can combine. 2r minus 19r minus negative 16r. I really don't like it when they write a minus and negative. So if I were you, I would just go ahead and change that to a positive, because we know when you subtract a negative, it's really a positive. Let me erase that and rewrite it so I've got more room, because y'all know how big I write. Okay, so we would have 2r minus 19r plus 16r. Also, see, it's like plus negative 11. I'm just going to write that as minus 11 equals negative 6. To me, this just makes it a lot cleaner and not so many signs happening up there. So now let's just combine these r's. I have 2r minus 19r plus 16r. So that would give me negative 1r. And then I still have minus 11 equals negative 6. So I need to get this r by itself, and I'm subtracting 11 from it. So my first step would be add 11 to each side. And then I would be left with negative r equals 5. But I don't know, or I don't want to know what negative r is. I want to know what positive r equals. So I need to multiply or divide each side by negative 1. Because I know a negative 1 divided by negative 1 would give me a positive 1. So I would just be left with positive r equals negative 5. Okay, let's plug it back into this original equation and just double check that we did the work correctly. So everywhere you see an r, we're going to plug in a negative 5. And you can keep the same equation if you want, minus negative 16 times negative 5 plus negative 11. So if I type all of this in my calculator, I get it to equal negative 6. And that's exactly what we want it to be. So we know we did it correctly. Alright, last problem. Woohoo! These would be challenge level problems, so like 90 or above. The first thing we need to do is distribute out this negative 8/10. So don't get scared because there's decimals involved. It's okay. Go ahead and multiply negative 0.8 times j, which would give me negative 0.8j. And then negative 0.8 times negative 6 would be negative 4.8. Don't forget to pay attention to your signs because it can throw your whole equation off if you miss one of them. And I would still have plus negative 7.89. I'm just going to change that to minus 7.89 equals negative 7.89. Alright, so let's go ahead and do some simplifying before we continue. I would still have negative 0.8j, but I can combine these numbers right here. Negative 4.8 minus 7.89. And whenever I subtract those, I get negative 12.69. And all of the left side still equals negative 7.89 on the right. So now I need to add 12.69 to each side. And I would be left with negative 0.8j equals 4.8. And then my last step would be to divide by negative, go back and erase that. Divide by negative 0.8. So negative 0.8 divided by negative 0.8 is 1. So I'd be left with 1j equals negative 6. So 1j equals negative 6. Okay, let's go ahead and check this just to make sure we did it correctly. So I'm going to plug in negative 6 for j. And I want the whole left side of my equation to equal this right side of negative 7.89. So whenever I evaluate this, I would get that it does equal negative 7.89. So I knew I did it correctly. Alright guys, this is your IXL for the week. Don't forget to send me that passcode telling me that you watched this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me anytime. Talk to you soon.